The following is rated F for fairness. Viewers' discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Audio Show. You know what, friends? I remember years ago being involved in a civil suit with a friend of mine. And I remember that we had to keep researching each and every solitary time. And I feel like if we never researched that particular suit, we wouldn't have kind of known how to assist the lawyer with the necessary line of, information that she may have needed to kind of win the suit, if you want to call it that, or make it more favorable in our direction. I'm starting to look at Anthony's lawyer and I'm wondering, right? There's a couple things I'm wondering, right? Is Anthony lawyer really that good? Because now I'm wondering who has the better lawyer, because clearly Amber's lawyer is punching in some very, very nice lines, but I don't hear anything at all from Anthony's lawyer. And it seems like she's already given up. Or is she basically coming in from just the woman is always right kind of point of view? I'm not quite certain. I think they just kind of gave her a cameo. I think that's more of what it is. And I don't think they're just going to feminist kind of line with it. I think them just kind of lazy with this storyline. But let's go back to what you said again to Anthony.
I really don't know what to do.
So she's entitled to 50-50. At this point, I have not heard from her lawyer, but I just say let's wait and see. Let's wait it out. We don't have to agree.
All right. So it's wild for her to say that I'm entitled to 50-50. I mean, that Amber is entitled to 50-50 without even looking at the actual facts and evidence presented in front of her. It's wild for her to just say that, but maybe they know something that we don't know, you know what I mean? And again, we're going to explore it as much as we can.
To 50-50. If she wants to fight this thing, she'll probably end up running out of money. So I say we just wait it out.
Wait it out? Like, you think that's a good idea? Like, look, 50-50, you gotta understand, like, I've amassed everything by myself. She hasn't even really contributed to anything as far as finances. If anything, she's been more of a liability.
So Anthony has always been mentioning this, and I keep trying to figure out what does he mean when he says that, Amber hasn't really helped him. Is it that he's saying that, he's done most of the things by himself? Is he saying that he's bringing in the assets into the marriage by himself? Which what I think he's trying to say. Some then say him got broke. But then we're saying, is he really broke, or is it that he was broke with just liquid cash? We're trying to find out exactly what they mean in all of that.
Is she still entitled to 50%?
She could get more, Anthony. Based on everything that you've done, I'm going to try and keep it at 50-50.
All right. And so the last thing she talks about is the whole idea of the baby. Okay. And we're going to put that in there. So I've basically re-simulated for us again. And I think this should give us like a broader view. Thank you very much to Miss Grant. Thank you very much to Riri, thank you very much to George, everybody. I mean, I just those other people that asked to add like other things inside of the question in itself. And I think I've asked the question the way you guys wanted me to ask it, right? So the big question was our good old friend ChatGPT. This is what it is. This is all we have right now. So what we have of the question is like this. And I said, hey, I got married, then I cheated and had a baby with my mistress. My wife finds out, she files for a divorce, we reconcile, and she does not go through the divorce. We renew our wedding vows. My wife one day decides to file for a divorce and wants 50% of all the marital assets, but I never cheated again. Before the marriage, I had $10 million in net worth. My wife had $1 million. We're just kind of using this. We have made about 20% more on our net worths. We're going to say that that's basically active income. Let's call it that. We have been married only 2.5 years. Both my wife and I are currently sleeping with someone else after filing for a divorce. I'm putting Denisha in there as a probability, right? Meaning I'm saying Anthony slept with Denisha. He hasn't, but we're just going to call that. We both have hidden assets because, of course, Amber hid the house, Anthony hiding money with Ben. What can she get? What are the possibilities? How will the Georgia courts look at this? What is a possible judgment splitting of our assets, side sources? And I always ask the side sources because I want to get it from credible lines of argument. So here's what we got. I'm not even going to waste any time with it. So we're going to go through this. Bear with us here, friends. It is heavy, but bear with us. So In Georgia, the outcomes, y'all know this already. It's equitable distribution, which means it's not just an automatic 50-50. Everybody keeps saying it's 50-50, and it's not an automatic 50-50. I'm trying to understand now, based on Georgia law, which is Skitland law, because they are using Georgia law. Every now and again, they talk about Georgia. Anyways, the marriage was first key facts that matter. So the key things that matter right now. The marriage was a short marriage, which is 2.5 years. Right now, a short marriage generally weighs against a large transfer of wealth from one spouse to another. So that matters. The length of the marriage matters. The courts often try to prevent a short marriage from becoming a windfall for either party. Is the source that we cite for that. That's where we get this from. So we know Georgia is a no-fault state. That's where we get that from. Most of the wealth existed before the marriage. So we're saying, let's say Anthony have the money before the marriage. No, that matters. Because if he has, what I'm getting from this is, if he has the money before the marriage, then it means it's deemed separate property, unless commingled. If him have the money during the marriage and somehow him put Amber inside of those accounts, then it matters in those. If the same thing for Amber. If Amber has accounts that Anthony had nothing to do with before she got married, then they have nothing to do with him, unless she puts all her money with his. So here we go. So husband 10 million, wife 1 million. Georgia generally treats property owned before marriage as separate property, and that is not subject to division. That's your site. That's the source. The next thing here is the original affair may carry less weight because of their reconciliation. This is extremely big based on even what Anthony has been saying, right? Based on what his lawyer just said just now. So let's look at this fact. The fact pattern is important. You cheated, wife filed, wife reconciled, your vows were renewed, you renewed vows, no further cheating occurred before the second divorce filing. This is very big. So let's look at this. A judge could view the reconciliation as evidence that the earlier misconduct was forgiven, or at least not a direct cause of the final divorce. The affair is not erased, but it may have substantially less impact than if the marriage ended immediately after the affair. In other words, like we were saying before, Amber had more weight last year with Brittany than she does now, which is what we're kind of arguing. Georgia judges have discretion, but reconciliation generally weakens the argument that the first affair should heavily impact property division years later. We haven't heard her arguing this. Remember what she just said just now to Anthony. Remember what she just said just now. She said this to Anthony again. Remember what she said after everything that you've done.
Is she still entitled to 50%?
She could get more, Anthony, based on everything that you've done.
Okay, so based on what she has said right there, so we're just kind of giving the real to you. So I'm wondering, how is she not arguing that? Anyways, and again, friends, I'm not on any side. I'm just trying to see exactly where the story is because the message is there. Nonetheless, both spouses are dating or sleeping after filing divorce. In many Georgia cases, conduct occurring after separation or after filing is viewed differently from conduct that caused the breakup of the marriage. Which means if he goes to go sleep with Denisha, that's why I give it Denisha in there, it not have that much impact and weight. For us, the audience, because we are more morally sound, we don't want him doing or cheating. That's really what it is. No, the major problem between the two of them is this, the hidden assets, right? Hidden assets are a major problem. This may be the biggest issue in your hypothetical. If either spouse hides bank accounts, moves money to a friend, undervalues a business, conceals cryptocurrency, transfers funds to a boyfriend or a girlfriend, which we know Amber has transferred funds and Anton has transferred funds and hide funds as well. So both of them has done that. The court can take adverse findings and redistribute assets to compensate the other spouse. A forensic accountant would likely be involved. Courts tend to react more strongly to financial misconduct than emotional misconduct. In other words, this is where I think the argument is. So it's showing you that most of the argument is here. And of course, that's the source. So a rough analysis. Here we go. Net worth, 10 million, increase 20%, and I've given that to both of them, which means it goes to $2 million. The current would be $12 million. Anthony's current net worth would be 12 million. For Amber, 1 million, current net worth would be 1.2 million. The combined net worth of both of them would be $13.2 million. Is the entire $2.2 million increase marital property? Not necessarily. So Georgia distinguishes between passive appreciation, example, stock market gains, real estate appreciation, investment growth. So in other words, what exactly was Anthony's assets in? The monies that he carried in that have appreciated, that is working, what did he carry those in? That's the question that you're trying to ask. Now, it is very cloudy as far as the guy that came into the room and he had to pay the guy off for the mortgage. That's cloudy. Giving Rolanda the money back is cloudy. Things like those things are cloudy. So we don't know all of those things. All right? So if the increase occurred merely because the market went up, Georgia often tends to appreciation as remaining separate property. In other words, if it's just appreciation, it's going to be separate property. Active appreciation, operating a business, that would go for the business that they have. Bar 44, things like those would come into play. What are the monies from Bar 44? What are the monies from the new restaurant right now? Those are the things that they're saying that the lawyer would look at, the judge would look at. All right, I think we can probably skip this if we want to. So let's move this out. We don't want to get into that. So let's look at this. C, hidden assets discovered. So the husband hides. Let's work at this. Let's say Anthony secretly was hiding $500,000 based on what he had, right? Let's say that's the money he make, the 20%. And the wife secretly hid $200,000. We're just giving hypothetical scenarios. Then the judge could award credits, offset distributions, impose sanctions, view credibility negatively. So the marital estate, which is the $2.2 million, in other words, based on what both of them have made from the marital assets, let's say it equates to 2.2, this is how the judge could split that. So the biggest thing in the case right now is marital assets and the hiding of the assets. So the wife could receive 60% of the marital assets, not the entire portion, the marital assets. In other words, whatever it is that they've made during the marriage, and the husband could receive 40%. So marital estate allocation, the wife probably could get 1.3 million and the husband could get 800,000. So here we go. So next thing we say now, could she get 50% of your entire $12 million? So based solely on the facts they provide, that would be unlikely. To obtain roughly $6 million, she would generally need to convince the court that major portions of your premarital wealth became marital wealth. In other words, this is a big forensic case. Assets were commingled. In other words, Anthony has to show that he's been taking the marital assets, everything what Amber have, and he's been using that to create monies. Businesses were transformed into marital property. In other words, all of those hidden assets Anthony had were things that he basically took from Amber and has formed those things. Separate assets were transmuted through joint ownership. We already know them have a joint bank account, but did Anthony put her name on every single solitary thing? Or that there were extraordinary financial misconduct. In 2.5 years of marriage, where you entered with $10 million and she entered with $1 million, Georgia courts would typically start from the premise that the premarital amounts belong to the original owner. So whatever Anthony did have before, them going to say, well, Anthony, this is actually your monies. So here are some ranges that they've given us. They've given us some ranges. Right? And let's work through this. And I'm glad that you all are hearing me. Thank you for sitting so far through the video. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe as I try to do the best I possibly can with this so we can learn. So, given only the facts that you supplied, and again, we don't have anything else, that's what we're going off of. Low end outcome for the wife. The wife keeps her own 1.2 million. The husband receives a little more of the premarital wealth, roughly 1.2 million to 1.5. Middle outcome, keeps her separate property, receives a meaningful portion of the marital appreciation, roughly $2 million to $3 million. Aggressive outcome against the husband, if substantial commingling, dissipation, hidden assets are proven. So, in other words, Shayla is very integral, Ben is very integral. Because with Shayla, you want to know, what has Anthony spent on as far as his child is concerned? With Daniel, you want to know what has Anthony hidden based on Ben. Those two factors are very important. In other words, those two backends very important. That's what they're trying to show you with this. To see the aggressive things, to see exactly where did his monies go. Where was he dissipating the assets? Was he moving them into the name of Anthony or whatever it is? What was he doing with them? That's why so perhaps 5 million to 3 million to 5 million plus. So that's where it gets very damaging for Anthony. It depends upon how the assets them were moved around. Were they being commingled with Amber's assets? How were they being handled? That is the biggest question. But straightforward, of 50% of your inheritance of your entire 12 million estate would generally be difficult to justify under the facts you've described. This type of case would almost certainly turn on forensic tracing of the assets, whether the growth was passive or active, whether separate property was commingled, and how much each spouse concealed. Those issues often matter more than the original affair once there has been reconciliation and a later divorce filing. So, thank you very much for sitting through with me. So, in other words, this is basically down to what your lawyer is able to find, what your lawyer is able to prove, what your lawyer is able to come up to, what kind of money Anthony brought into the marriage, what is being considered as marital property. Based on Skitland law, those are the things. So the 50-50 is not right off of the bat, and I'm wondering, is Anthony's lawyer really doing the work? That is the question. That is the question I'm asking now. Is she actually working? I mess around and I call, Ernestine's lawyer, the Temu lawyer, and I joke around when I'm saying that. I want y'all to know that. I'm joking around. If she practices in Georgia, then hey, kudos to her for practicing. Don't worry. These are just skits. So we just talk on them. But truth of the matter is that's exactly where they are. So the question is, could Anthony's lawyer need changed? That is the biggest of questions. In other words, has she been working? Because right now it sounds like she already gave up before even knowing the circumstance. Remember, she just met Anthony. She just met with Anthony. She hadn't even opened the case as yet. And once she opened the case, she's already claiming 50-50. Not me says, so if you want, I can go back to where she was again. Just open the case, and this is where she's opened the case from. Let me pull it up for you.
I really don't know what to do.
So she's entitled to 50-50.
That's what I'm talking about. She just opened the case. She don't know it. We haven't seen what it is, and she's just being entitled to 50-50. Why 50-50 so quick? Anyways, friends, give me your take. Do you like this? Do you like this kind of content? I try to see if I can bring it every now and again. But this is where we are. I'm wondering, and I'm starting to question Anthony's lawyer, if she's actually doing the work, if she's trying to find information out, or, if it's just a joke. And if Anthony really wants Denisha, I think his best course of action is to start to do his research. And to start, if he can get it into his head that Amber may not want him and that he may need to protect his assets instead of playing around. Because Amber is not joking. And if he misses the mark, then yes, she will get him. So even with our condemnation defense, even that she's trying to use in there, I haven't heard anything of that with Anthony's lawyers yet. Is she going to come up with that at all? Anyways, give me your take. Don't want to make the video, like, share, comment, subscribe. I'm going to talk to y'all soon.